Matt Damon never imagined that his father's life would be saved by a young stranger, and that her decision would change everything. In an upscale Boston neighborhood, his father collapses on the sidewalk, ignored by everyone, until a 20-year-old woman, unaware of who he is, chooses to help. Days later, she disappears. Moved by the story, Matt sets out to find her, and when he finally does, what he does for her changes her life forever. To continue hearing this beautiful and special story, please hit that like button and subscribe to the channel. Write your name and the city you're watching from so I can include a special shout out for you in an upcoming story. The October wind cut through Beacon Hill's historic streets like a blade, sending golden leaves dancing across the cobblestones. At 73, Kent Damon had learned to navigate these uneven sidewalks with the careful precision of someone who understood that one wrong step could change everything. But understanding and preventing are two different things entirely. It happened so quickly that even he couldn't piece together the exact sequence. One moment he was walking toward his brownstone, groceries in hand, thinking about the phone call he'd just had with his famous son. The next he was on the ground, his right hip screaming in pain, apples rolling across the sidewalk like scattered marbles. The expensive neighborhood around him seemed to pause. Luxury cars continued their quiet hum. Well-dressed pedestrians maintained their purposeful stride, but Kent felt utterly alone in his vulnerability. His phone had skittered across the pavement, its screen now a spiderweb of cracks. The irony wasn't lost on him. Surrounded by wealth, yet completely helpless. 20-year-old Emily Carter had been walking these same streets for a different reason entirely. While others strolled past million-dollar homes with casual familiarity, she was counting her remaining cash and calculating how many more days she could afford her tiny studio apartment 3 neighborhoods over. The cleaning job she'd just finished in one of these pristine brownstones had paid enough for groceries, if she shopped carefully. That's when she saw him, an elderly man on the ground, his silver hair catching the afternoon light, one hand pressed against his hip while the other reached futilely for scattered belongings. What struck her most wasn't his obvious pain, but the way people seemed to flow around him like water around a stone, seeing but not stopping. Emily didn't hesitate. In a world that had taught her to keep her head down and mind her own business, something deeper compelled her forward. Maybe it was the memory of her own grandmother, who'd raised her until Emily was 15. Maybe it was simply the recognition of someone who needed help when no one else was willing to give it. "Sir, are you okay?" she asked, dropping to her knees beside him, without regard for her only pair of clean jeans. Kent looked up into the face of a young woman with concerned brown eyes, and an expression of genuine worry that seemed foreign in this neighborhood of polite indifference. Her clothes were simple, worn jeans, a faded sweater, sneakers that had seen better days, but her presence felt like sunlight breaking through clouds. "I think I may have broken something," he admitted, his voice strained but grateful. "My hip. I can't seem to get up." Emily's mind raced through possibilities. Call an ambulance, but that would cost him thousands. Help him up, but what if she made an injury worse? Instead, she did something that would later seem impossibly small, yet infinitely significant. She stayed. "Let me help you get comfortable first," she said, gently moving his scattered groceries aside. She noticed his hands were scraped from the fall, small cuts that were already beginning to bleed. Without thinking, she pulled out the small pack of tissues she always carried, a habit from years of taking care of her grandmother, and began carefully cleaning the dirt from his palms. The tenderness of the gesture caught Kent off guard. When was the last time someone had cared for him without expecting anything in return? His son was famous, successful, but always busy. His late wife had been gone for 5 years. The people in his life now were either employees or acquaintances who knew his connection to Hollywood royalty. "You don't have to do this," he said quietly, watching this young stranger tend to wounds that weren't even serious. "Yes, I do," Emily replied simply, her focus entirely on making sure no debris remained in the cuts. Everyone deserves help when they need it. As Emily finished cleaning Kent's hands, she noticed him wince again as he tried to shift position. The October air was getting colder, and she could see he was beginning to shiver, whether from pain, temperature, or shock she couldn't tell. "Are you diabetic?" she asked, remembering her grandmother's health struggles. Sometimes a fall can mess with blood sugar. Kent shook his head, but Emily noticed his complexion was pale. She'd packed a simple lunch for herself, a peanut butter and jelly sandwich and a small apple, planning to eat it in the park after her cleaning job. Without hesitation, she unwrapped the sandwich and broke it in half. "Here," she said, offering him the larger portion. "You should eat something. It'll help with the shock." "I couldn't possibly," Kent began, but Emily was already pressing the sandwich into his hands. "My grandmother always said food is medicine for more than just hunger," she explained, settling cross-legged on the sidewalk beside him as if they were having a picnic instead of managing a crisis. "Besides, peanut butter fixes everything. That's probably not scientifically accurate, but it's worked for me so far." Despite his pain, Kent found himself smiling. There was something infectious about this young woman's matter-of-fact kindness. She wasn't treating him like a victim or a burden. She was treating him like a human being who deserved care. They sat together on the sidewalk, sharing a sandwich that probably cost less than the tip most people in this neighborhood left at restaurants. Emily told him about her grandmother, how she taught her that helping others wasn't about what you could afford to give, but about what you couldn't afford not to give. "She used to say that kindness is the only thing that multiplies when you divide it," Emily said, taking a small bite of her half of the sandwich. "I never really understood what she meant until after she was gone." Kent listened, captivated not just by her words, but by the complete absence of self-pity in her voice. Here was a young woman who clearly had very little, sharing what she had with a complete stranger, and somehow making him feel like she was the one receiving the gift. "What's your name?" he asked finally. "Emily?" "Emily Carter." "Well, Emily Carter? I'm Kent. Kent Damon." He watched her face carefully, but there was no flicker of recognition. In a world where his last name opened doors and started conversations, her lack of reaction was refreshing. "Nice to meet you, Kent," she said simply. "Now, let's figure out how to get you home safely." Emily helped him slowly to his feet, supporting his weight as he tested his ability to walk. The hip wasn't broken, painful, but functional. She gathered his scattered groceries, noting the quality of the items and the expensive neighborhood, but making no comment. Instead, she simply asked for his address and began walking with him, matching his careful pace. The walk to his brownstone took 20 minutes, that felt like 20 seconds to Kent. Emily talked easily about small things, the changing leaves, the architecture of the neighborhood, a dog they passed that reminded her of one her grandmother had owned. She had a gift for conversation that felt natural, unforced, like talking to an old friend. When they reached his front door, Emily waited until he was safely inside before turning to leave. "Emily," Kent called after her, "how can I thank you?" She paused, turning back with a smile that seemed to light up the entire street. "You don't need to thank me, Kent. Just maybe help someone else when you get the chance. That's how it works." And then she was gone, walking back into the maze of Boston streets, leaving Kent standing in his doorway with a profound sense that something important had just happened. He didn't know her last name, her phone number, or anything about her life beyond those few shared moments. But he knew with absolute certainty that Emily Carter had just reminded him of something he'd forgotten, that goodness exists in the world, often in the most unexpected places. 3 days later, Kent sat in his leather chair, staring at the phone in his lap. His hip was healing well, but the memory of Emily's kindness seemed to grow stronger rather than fade. He told the story to his housekeeper, to his doctor, to anyone who would listen, but somehow the words felt inadequate to capture what had actually happened. Finally, he dialed a number he knew by heart. "Dad?" Matt Damon's voice came through the speaker, warm but distracted. "How are you feeling? Better?" "Much better, thanks to someone very special," Kent said, settling back in his chair. "Matt, I need to tell you about something that happened the day I fell." Matt was in his trailer on a film set in Georgia, between takes of an intense courtroom drama. He'd been worried about his father since the fall, especially since Kent lived alone and was too proud to accept help most of the time. But there was something different in his father's voice now. Not the resigned tone of someone recovering from injury, but something lighter, more alive. "There was this young woman," Kent began, And then he told the entire story. He described Emily's immediate response, her gentle care of his scraped hands, the shared sandwich, the walk home. But more than the actions, he tried to convey the spirit behind them, the complete absence of calculation, the natural instinct to help without expecting anything in return. She didn't know who I was, Matt. Didn't recognize the name. Didn't care about the neighborhood or the house. She just saw someone who needed help, and she helped. And the way she helped, Kent's voice trailed off as he searched for words. It reminded me of your mother, that same generous heart. Matt found himself completely focused on his father's words, the script in his hands forgotten. In Hollywood, he was surrounded by people who wanted something from him. Roles, money, connections, endorsements. Genuine kindness without agenda had become so rare that he'd almost forgotten it existed. What was her name again? Matt asked. Emily Carter. She was maybe 20, 21, working as a house cleaner, I think, based on her uniform. Matt, I've been thinking about her nonstop. In all my years, through all the success and the money and the recognition, I don't think anyone has ever shown me such pure, uncomplicated kindness. Did you get her contact information? No, and I'm kicking myself for it. She was gone before I thought to ask. But Matt, I need to find her. I need to thank her properly. That girl probably saved my life. If she hadn't stopped, I might have been on that sidewalk for hours. Matt felt something stirring in his chest, not just curiosity, but a sense of mission. His father was many things, successful, intelligent, sometimes stubborn, but he wasn't given to exaggeration or sentiment. If Kent was this moved by Emily's actions, then something truly remarkable had happened. I'll help you find her, Dad, Matt said, without hesitation. We'll hire a private investigator, put up notices, whatever it takes. I was hoping you'd say that. Kent's relief was audible. But Matt, when we find her, I want to do more than just say thank you. That girl was wearing worn-out clothes, sharing her only sandwich with a stranger. She's clearly struggling, and she deserves so much better than what life has given her. What do you have in mind? I want to change her life, completely, the way she changed mine. Matt smiled, recognizing the determined tone in his father's voice. It was the same tone he'd used when deciding to build a school in Cambodia, or when he'd quietly funded scholarships for underprivileged kids. Kent Damon might live modestly and avoid the spotlight, but he had a fierce sense of justice and an even fiercer commitment to helping others. Then that's what we'll do, Matt said. We'll find Emily Carter, and we'll make sure her kindness comes back to her in ways she never imagined. As Matt hung up the phone, he felt energized in a way he hadn't experienced in months. This wasn't about publicity or image or career advancement. This was about something fundamental. The idea that good deeds should be rewarded, that kindness should be recognized, and that sometimes the universe needs help ensuring that the right people receive the right opportunities. He had no idea how difficult Emily would be to find, or how much her story would challenge everything he thought he knew about deserving help and accepting it. 2 weeks into the search, Matt Damon was beginning to understand why Emily Carter had made such an impression on his father. She was, quite literally, invisible to the systems that track modern life. The private investigator he'd hired, Sarah Chen, was one of the best in Boston. She'd found missing persons across continents, tracked down witnesses who'd vanished into thin air, and reunited families separated by decades. But Emily Carter was proving to be a unique challenge. She's what we call a ghost, Sarah explained during their meeting at a downtown coffee shop. No credit cards, no social media presence, no permanent address that we can find. She worked for a cleaning service, but they paid her in cash and have no forwarding information. It's like she deliberately made herself invisible. Matt leaned forward, frustrated but intrigued. People don't just disappear in the digital age. Actually, they do. Usually for one of three reasons. They're running from something, they're protecting someone, or they've learned that staying invisible is safer than being seen. Sarah pulled out a thin file. What I can tell you is this. Emily Carter was born in Springfield, Massachusetts. Mother died when she was 7, father left when she was 9. raised by her grandmother until she was 15. What happened when she was 15? Grandmother died. Emily went into the foster system for a while, but aged out at 18. After that, she appeared sporadically in public records, a few jobs here and there, always paid in cash, always short-term. No arrests, no debts, no nothing. She's basically living off the grid. Matt felt a growing sense of urgency, mixed with admiration. Emily wasn't just kind. She was resilient in ways that suggested a difficult past. The fact that she'd helped his father, despite clearly having so little herself, spoke to a strength of character that was becoming rarer in his experience. "There's something else," Sarah continued. "I found a former coworker from a diner where Emily worked last year. She said Emily was saving money to go back to school, but then something happened, she wouldn't say what, and Emily just disappeared one day, left behind her deposit on an apartment, quit without notice. What do you think happened?" "Based on the pattern, I think someone found her who she didn't want to be found by. Could be family, could be an ex-boyfriend, could be debt collectors, but something spooked her enough to abandon what little stability she had." Matt stared out the coffee shop window at the busy street beyond. Somewhere in this city, or maybe in another city entirely, was a young woman who'd shown his father extraordinary kindness and then vanished like smoke. The more he learned about Emily's situation, the more he understood that finding her was only the first challenge. Earning her trust would be another entirely. "Keep looking," he told Sarah, "and expand the search beyond Boston. If she's running from something, she might have gone far away." That evening, Matt called his father with an update. Kent listened quietly as Matt explained what they'd learned, his concern growing with each detail. "Matt, this girl isn't just someone who helped me, she's someone who needs help herself. When we find her, we need to be very careful about how we approach this. If she's been hurt before, if she's learned not to trust people, then we need to prove we're different." "I've been thinking the same thing," Matt replied. "Maybe we should consider that when we find her, I shouldn't be the one to make first contact. A famous face might scare her off." "Good thinking. But Matt, I want you to understand something. This isn't about charity or pity. This is about recognizing someone who deserves better than what she's gotten. Emily Carter has something rare, genuine goodness, and I believe that goodness should be rewarded. Not because she needs rescuing, but because the world needs more people like her." Matt nodded, even though his father couldn't see him. "I understand, Dad. We're not trying to save her. We're trying to give her the opportunities she deserves." "Exactly. And if we do this right, if we can help her without making her feel like a charity case, then maybe we'll all learn something about what really matters." As Matt hung up the phone, he realized this search had become about more than gratitude. It had become about hope. The hope that genuine kindness still existed in the world, and that it could be recognized and rewarded. Emily Carter represented something he'd almost stopped believing in. The possibility that people could be good without agenda, generous without calculation, helpful without expecting anything in return. Now he just had to find her. 6 weeks after the search began, Sarah Chen called Matt with news that made his heart race. "I found her," Sarah said simply. "Emily Carter. She's in Hartford, Connecticut, about 2 hours south of Boston." Matt was in his Los Angeles home, having flown back for a brief break between projects. The call came at 6 a.m. Pacific time, but he was instantly alert. "Where exactly?" "She's staying at a women's shelter called Haven House, has been for about a month. She's working part-time at a community center teaching basic computer skills to other residents." The shelter director, Maria Santos, confirmed that Emily's been there, but wouldn't give me any more details without proper authorization. Matt felt relief flood through him, followed immediately by concern. A women's shelter meant Emily was in a more vulnerable position than they'd even realized. "What's the next step?" "That's up to you. I can't get more information without involving Emily directly, and I strongly recommend you think carefully about how to approach this. Shelter residents are there for a reason, and unexpected contact from strangers can be triggering." Matt thanked Sarah and immediately called his father. Kent's response was immediate and decisive. "We need to go to Hartford, today, but we need to do this right, Matt. No surprise visits, no cameras, no fanfare. We approached the shelter director first, explained the situation, and let her decide how to proceed. Are you sure you're up for the drive? Your hip? My hip is fine, and I wouldn't miss this for the world. That young woman changed my life, Matt. The least I can do is make sure this doesn't complicate hers. 3 hours later, Matt and his father were sitting in Maria Santos's office at Haven House. The shelter was nothing like Matt had expected. Instead of institutional bleakness, it felt warm and purposeful. Children's artwork covered the walls, and he could hear the sound of laughter from somewhere deeper in the building. Maria Santos was a woman in her 50s with kind eyes and a direct manner that immediately put both men at ease. She listened carefully as Kent told the story of his fall and Emily's help, occasionally nodding but saying nothing until he finished. Mr. Damon, she said finally, I need you to understand something about the women who come here. They're not here because they made bad choices or because they're looking for handouts. They're here because life has been particularly hard on them, and they need a safe space to rebuild. I understand, Kent said. I don't want to disrupt Emily's life or make her uncomfortable. I just want to thank her properly. And I want to help her, Matt added. My father is right. What she did was remarkable. She deserves to have good things happen to her. Maria studied both men carefully. In her 20 years running Haven House, she'd become an expert at reading people's intentions. These two seemed genuine, but she'd learned to be cautious. Emily is special, Maria said finally. She arrived here about a month ago with nothing but a backpack and a story about needing a fresh start. She's been one of our most helpful residents, always the first to volunteer, always looking out for others. But she's also been hurt badly by someone she trusted. She doesn't talk about it, but the signs are all there. Kent and Matt exchanged glances. This was even more delicate than they'd realized. What would you recommend? Kent asked. Let me talk to her first. I'll tell her that someone wants to thank her for a kindness she showed, but I won't mention names or details. If she's interested in meeting you, then we can arrange something safe and comfortable. If she's not ready, then you respect that and leave her alone. Matt nodded immediately. Absolutely. We want to help, not hurt. Give me a few days, Maria said. And gentlemen, if this meeting happens, it happens here, in a place where Emily feels safe, and it happens on her terms. As they drove back to Boston, Kent was quiet for most of the journey. Finally, he spoke. Matt, I keep thinking about what the shelter director said. Emily's been hurt by someone she trusted. What if our showing up brings back bad memories? What if we make things worse instead of better? Matt had been thinking the same thing. Then we'll be very careful, Dad. We'll follow her lead, respect her boundaries, and make sure she knows she's in control of the situation. And if she doesn't want our help, then we respect that too. But Dad, I have a feeling about this. Emily Carter helped you because she has a good heart. Maybe she'll let us help her for the same reason, not because she needs rescuing, but because she recognizes genuine good intentions when she sees them. Kent smiled. I hope you're right, son. I really hope you're right. 3 days later, Maria Santos approached Emily in the shelter's small computer lab, where she was helping an older woman set up an email account. Emily, could I speak with you privately for a moment? Emily looked up, immediately alert. In her experience, private conversations with authority figures rarely brought good news. But Maria's expression was reassuring, not concerned. They walked to Maria's office, and Emily took the seat across from the desk that she'd sat in on her first day at Haven House. That day she'd been exhausted, scared, and unsure whether she'd made the right choice in running away from Boston. Now she felt stronger, more stable, but still cautious about unexpected developments. Emily, I received an interesting call a few days ago, Maria began. It seems you helped someone a while back, an elderly man who had fallen on a sidewalk. Do you remember? Emily's breath caught. She remembered Kent perfectly. His kind eyes, the way he'd shared her simple sandwich with such gratitude, the genuine warmth in his voice when he'd thanked her. But she also remembered why she'd left Boston so suddenly after that encounter. I remember, she said carefully. Is he okay? He's fine, more than fine actually. He and his son have been looking for you for weeks because they want to thank you properly. They'd like to meet with you, but only if you're comfortable with that." Emily's mind raced. She'd learned to be suspicious of people who claimed they wanted to help her. The last time someone had made that promise, she'd ended up fleeing her apartment in the middle of the night, leaving behind what little stability she'd managed to build. Did they say what they wanted to thank me for? I mean, I didn't do anything special. Anyone would have helped. Maria smiled gently. "Actually, Emily, that's not true. The man said that dozens of people walked past him that day, but only you stopped. Only you stayed with him, cared for his injuries, shared your food, and walked him home. To him, that was everything." Emily was quiet for a long moment, staring at her hands. She thought about Kent, about how scared he'd looked lying on that sidewalk, how grateful he'd been for such a simple kindness. She'd never expected to see him again, certainly never expected that encounter to follow her to Hartford. "What do they want from me?" she asked, finally. "They want to say thank you, and from what I can tell, they want to help you in return. But Emily, I want you to know, you're under no obligation to meet with them. You're safe here, and you get to choose what happens next." Emily appreciated Maria's protection, but she found herself curious despite her caution. Kent had seemed like a genuinely good person, and if his son had inherited that same character, did they say who the son is? Maria hesitated. "Yes, but I think it's better if you hear that from them. What I will say is that they seem to have good intentions, and they've been very respectful of your privacy throughout this process." Emily made her decision. "Okay, I'll meet with them, but here, where I feel safe." "Of course. How about tomorrow afternoon? I'll be here the whole time, and you can end the meeting whenever you want." The next day, Emily found herself more nervous than she'd expected. She'd chosen to wear her best clothes. A simple blue dress she'd found at a thrift store, and the cardigan her grandmother had knitted for her years ago. It was armor, in a way, reminding her of the love she'd known and the strength she'd inherited. When Maria knocked on the common room door and entered with two men, Emily's first thought was that Kent looked much better than when she'd last seen him. He was walking without pain, his color was good, and his smile was warm and familiar. Her second thought, as the younger man stepped forward, was that he looked incredibly familiar in a way that had nothing to do with personal memory. "Emily," Kent said, his voice full of warmth, "I can't tell you how wonderful it is to see you again." "It's good to see you too, Kent," Emily replied, standing up. "I'm so glad you're feeling better." "Emily," Kent continued, "I'd like you to meet my son, Matt." Matt Damon stepped forward, extending his hand with a gentle smile that somehow looked both famous and genuine. "Emily, it's an honor to meet you. My father hasn't stopped talking about you since the day you helped him." Emily shook his hand, trying to process the surreal nature of the moment. Matt Damon. The Matt Damon was standing in a women's shelter in Hartford, wanting to thank her for helping his father. If someone had told her this would happen when she'd knelt on that Boston sidewalk, she'd have thought they were crazy. Wow, she said, then immediately felt embarrassed by her inarticulate response. "I mean, it's nice to meet you too, but I have to say, this is not what I was expecting." Matt laughed, a warm sound that seemed to fill the small room. "I imagine not. And I want you to know, Emily, that my being here isn't about publicity or attention or anything like that. This is personal. What you did for my father, it meant everything to him. And to me." They sat down together, Maria taking a seat nearby but giving them space to talk. For the next hour, Emily listened as Kent and Matt told her about their search, about their desire to thank her, and about their growing understanding of just how remarkable her act of kindness had been. "The thing is, Emily," Matt said eventually, "we want to do more than just say thank you. We want to help you the way you helped my father. We want to give you opportunities, support your dreams, help you build the life you deserve." Emily felt a familiar wariness creep in. "What kind of help?" "Whatever kind you want," Kent said immediately. "College tuition, job training, a place to live, seed money for a business, whatever would make the biggest difference in your life." Emily was quiet for a long moment, studying both men's faces. They seemed sincere, but she'd learned that sincerity could be performed. However, there was something in Kent's eyes, the same gentle kindness she'd seen that day on the sidewalk, that made her want to trust him. "Why?" she asked finally. "I mean, I appreciate the offer, but I didn't help your father because I wanted something in return. I helped him because he needed help." "We know that," Matt said. "That's exactly why we want to help you. Because you're the kind of person who deserves good things to happen to her. And because the world needs more people like you." Emily felt tears threatening and blinked them back. She'd spent so long being careful, being suspicious, protecting herself from disappointment. But sitting here with Kent and Matt, she found herself wanting to believe that maybe, just maybe, good things could happen without a catch. "I need to think about this," she said finally. "It's incredibly generous, but it's also a lot to process." "Of course," Kent said immediately. "Take all the time you need. We're not going anywhere." As the meeting ended and the two men prepared to leave, Matt turned back to Emily one last time. "Emily, I just want you to know, my father was right. What you did that day wasn't just helping someone. It was reminding him that goodness exists in the world. And now, you've reminded me of the same thing." After they left, Emily sat in the common room for a long time, staring out the window and trying to make sense of what had just happened. Maria eventually joined her, sitting quietly until Emily was ready to talk. "They seem genuine," Emily said finally. "They do," Maria agreed. "The question is, what do you want to do?" Emily thought about her grandmother, about the lessons she'd learned about kindness and courage and taking chances when they were offered with good intentions. She thought about the life she'd been living. Always running, always hiding, always afraid to trust or hope for better. Maybe it was time to stop running and start believing that she deserved the same kindness she'd always been so willing to give others. That night, Emily lay awake in her narrow bed at Haven House, staring at the ceiling and replaying the afternoon's conversation. Around her, the shelter's nighttime sounds provided a familiar backdrop: soft snoring, the occasional whispered conversation, the settling of an old building that housed too many stories of struggle and resilience. She thought about her grandmother's voice, the way she used to say, "Emily, darling, sometimes the universe sends us exactly what we need, but we have to be brave enough to recognize it and wise enough to accept it." The next morning, Emily found Maria in the kitchen, preparing breakfast for the residents. "I want to say yes," Emily said without preamble, "but I'm scared." Maria set down the coffee pot and gave Emily her full attention. "What scares you most? What if it's not real? What if there's a catch I'm not seeing? What if I let myself hope and then—" Emily's voice trailed off, but Maria understood. In the shelter business, you learn to recognize the signs of someone who'd been disappointed too many times. "Emily, let me ask you something. When you helped Kent that day, what did you expect in return?" "Nothing. I just wanted to help. And yet here we are, with his family wanting to help you. Maybe the universe does work in mysterious ways sometimes." Emily smiled despite her anxiety. "You sound like my grandmother." "I'll take that as a compliment. But, Emily, here's what I think. You can't live your whole life protecting yourself from disappointment. Sometimes you have to take a leap of faith, especially when the people offering the net seem trustworthy." That afternoon, Emily called the number Matt had given her. He answered on the second ring. "Emily, I'm so glad you called." "I've been thinking about your offer," she said, her voice steadier than she felt. "And I'd like to accept it, but I have some conditions." "Of course. What do you need?" Emily had spent the morning making a list, thinking through not just what she wanted, but what she needed to feel safe and in control of her own destiny. "First, I want to start slowly. I don't want to quit my job at the community center right away or leave Haven House until I'm sure this is real and sustainable." "Absolutely. You set the pace." "Second, I want to go back to school, but I want to choose the program myself. Been thinking about social work, about helping people the way Maria has helped me." "That sounds perfect. We'll support whatever you choose to study." "Third, I want some of this help to go to Haven House." Maria and this place saved my life, and I want to make sure other women get the same chance I'm getting." Matt was quiet for a moment, and Emily worried she'd overstepped. Then he spoke, and she could hear the smile in his voice. "Emily, you are remarkable. Of course we'll help Haven House. In fact, I think my father would be thrilled to support the place that's been taking care of you." They made plans to meet again the following week to discuss specifics. Emily would start by taking a few college preparatory courses while continuing to work part-time. Matt and Kent would help her find a small apartment near the community college. Nothing fancy, but safe and hers. The scholarship they were setting up would cover not just tuition, but living expenses, books, everything she needed to focus on her studies without worrying about survival. When Emily told Maria about the conversation, the shelter director's eyes filled with tears. "I'm so proud of you," Maria said, "not just for accepting help, but for the way you're accepting it, on your own terms, with your dignity intact, and with your heart still focused on helping others." "I learned from the best," Emily replied. "Maria, I need you to know, none of this would be possible without what you've done for me here. You didn't just give me a bed and 3 meals a day, you gave me back my sense of self-worth that was always there, Emily. Sometimes we just need a safe place to remember who we are." 3 months later, Emily stood in the doorway of her new apartment, holding the keys in her trembling hand. It wasn't much, a 1-bedroom place near Hartford Community College with worn hardwood floors and windows that looked out onto a tree-lined street. But it was hers. For the first time since her grandmother had died, she had a home that belonged to her. Matt had insisted on being there when she moved in, bringing not just moral support, but practical help. He'd arrived with his sleeves rolled up, ready to carry boxes and assemble furniture like any friend would do. Watching one of Hollywood's biggest stars struggle with IKEA instructions had been surreal enough to make Emily laugh until her sides hurt. "I think this shelf is mocking me," Matt said, staring at the pile of wooden pieces and screws scattered across Emily's living room floor. "Here, let me try," Emily said, kneeling beside him. Within minutes, she had the bookshelf taking shape. "My grandmother always said I had good hands for fixing things. She sounds like she was an amazing woman." "She was everything to me," Emily said quietly, running her hand along the smooth wood. "I think she would have liked you and your father. She always said you could judge people by how they treated strangers." Matt smiled. "Well, then she definitely would have approved of you." As they worked together to make the apartment feel like home, Emily found herself amazed by how normal everything felt. Despite Matt's fame, despite the extraordinary circumstances that had brought them together, there was something comfortable about their friendship. He didn't make her feel like a charity case or a project. He made her feel like someone worth knowing. That evening, Kent joined them for Emily's first dinner in her new home. Takeout Chinese food, eaten on the floor because her dining table hadn't been delivered yet. As they sat surrounded by moving boxes, sharing stories and laughing, Emily felt something she hadn't experienced in years, a sense of belonging. "Emily," Kent said as the evening wound down, "there's something I want you to know. What you did for me that day, it didn't just help me physically, it reminded me of something I'd forgotten." "What's that?" "That kindness exists without agenda. In my world, in Matt's world, people are usually kind because they want something, but you were kind simply because it was the right thing to do. That's rarer than you might think." Emily felt tears prick her eyes. "I don't think I'm anything special, Kent. I just did what anyone should do." "But that's exactly what makes you special," Matt said gently. "You think helping others is normal, expected, just part of being human. In a world where most people look the other way, that perspective is revolutionary." Later, as Emily lay in her own bed in her own apartment for the first time in over a year, she thought about the journey that had brought her here. 6 months ago, she had been sleeping in a shelter, convinced that she'd never have stability or safety again. Now she had both, plus something she'd never expected, hope for the future. Her phone buzzed with a text from Maria. "How does it feel to be home?" Emily typed back, "Like the beginning of something wonderful." And for the first time in years, she truly believed it. 2 years later, Emily walked across the stage at Southern Connecticut State University, her bachelor's degree in social work finally in hand. In the audience, she could see Kent and Matt, cheering with the enthusiasm of proud family members, and Maria wiping tears from her eyes. It had been a long journey, working part-time while carrying a full course load, studying late into the night, pushing through moments when the old fears and doubts crept in, but she'd made it. After the ceremony, they gathered at a small restaurant to celebrate. Emily looked around the table at the people who had become her chosen family and felt overwhelmed with gratitude. "I have an announcement," she said, raising her glass of sparkling cider. "I've been offered a job." "That's wonderful," Kent exclaimed. "Where?" "Haven House. Maria's promoting me to assistant director. I'll be working with new residents, helping them transition from crisis to stability." Matt grinned. "That's perfect, Emily. You'll be amazing at that." "There's more," Emily continued, her excitement bubbling over. "I want to start a program, a partnership between Haven House and local businesses to provide job training and placement for shelter residents. I've already talked to several companies who are interested." "What would you need to make that happen?" Kent asked, and Emily could see the familiar gleam in his eye that meant he was already planning how to help. Funding for the program coordinator position, space for training sessions, and connections with businesses willing to participate. Emily paused, looking at both men. "I know I'm asking for a lot, but—" "You're not asking for anything," Matt interrupted. "You're describing a solution to a real problem, and you're the perfect person to implement it. Consider it done." Over the following months, Emily threw herself into her new role with the same determination she'd brought to her studies. The job training program, which they named Second Chances, launched with 5 partner businesses and 12 shelter residents. Emily worked directly with each participant, helping them identify their strengths, develop new skills, and prepare for interviews. The program's first success story was Lisa, a single mother who'd come to Haven House after escaping an abusive relationship. Emily had seen something special in Lisa's quiet determination and had encouraged her to apply for the office administration track. 6 months later, Lisa had a full-time job at a local law firm and her own apartment. "You saved my life," Lisa told Emily on the day she moved out of the shelter. "No," Emily replied. "You saved your own life. I just helped you see that you could." Kent, who had become a regular volunteer at Haven House, witnessed this exchange. Later, he pulled Emily aside. "Do you realize what you just did there?" he asked. "I helped someone find a job?" "No, my dear. You gave someone back their dignity and self-worth, just like you did for me that day on the sidewalk. You have a gift, Emily. You see people's potential when they can't see it themselves." Emily thought about her grandmother, about the lessons she'd learned about the power of believing in people. "I think I learned it from someone who believed in me when I couldn't believe in myself." 5 years after that chance encounter on a Boston sidewalk, Emily stood before a packed auditorium at the annual National Social Work Conference. She'd been invited to speak about innovative approaches to helping women transition out of homelessness, and the Second Chances program had become a model being replicated in cities across the country. In the front row sat her chosen family. Kent, now 78 and still volunteering weekly at Haven House, Matt, who had quietly funded similar programs in 6 other cities, and Maria, who had become both mentor and surrogate mother. Behind them were dozens of women who had graduated from the Second Chances program, now successful in careers ranging from healthcare to business administration. "When I was 20 years old," Emily began, "I thought helping others was simply what people did. I didn't realize that a single act of kindness could change not just one life, but dozens of lives, creating ripples that would spread further than I could ever imagine." She told the story of helping Kent, of being found by his son, of the journey from shelter resident to program director. But more than that, she talked about the power of seeing potential in people who had forgotten they had any. "The women in our program don't need to be saved," she said, her voice strong and clear. "They need to be reminded of their own strength, given the tools to rebuild their lives, and connected with people who believe in their potential. When we do that, when we treat people with dignity and respect while offering practical support, amazing things happen. After her speech, Emily was surrounded by social workers, program directors, and policymakers wanting to know more about replicating the Second Chances model. But what moved her most was a young woman who approached her near the end of the evening. "Miss Carter, my name is Jennifer. I heard your story and I wanted to thank you." "Thank me for what?" "For proving that people like me, people who've made mistakes, who've been knocked down by life, can still make a difference. I'm starting social work school next fall, and I want to work with homeless youth." Emily felt the familiar tightening in her throat that came with moments of profound connection. "Jennifer, the world needs people like you. People who understand struggle and want to help others through it. Don't ever doubt that you have something valuable to offer." As the conference ended and Emily prepared to return to Hartford, Matt found her in the hotel lobby. "Dad wanted me to give you this," he said, handing her a small wrapped package. Inside was a simple silver necklace with a small pendant in the shape of a heart. The accompanying note, in Kent's careful handwriting, read, "For Emily, who taught an old man that kindness is the most powerful force in the universe. Thank you for showing us that helping others isn't just about what we give, it's about what we become in the process." Emily fastened the necklace around her neck, feeling the weight of the small heart against her chest. It was a reminder of the journey that had brought her here, but more than that, it was a symbol of the truth she'd learned, that every act of kindness creates the possibility for more kindness, and that the love we give away always finds its way back to us, multiplied beyond our wildest dreams. That night, as she flew back to Hartford, Emily looked out the airplane window at the lights scattered across the darkness below. Each light represented a life, a story, a person with dreams and struggles and potential. Somewhere down there were people who needed help, people who were ready to give help, and people who were about to discover, as she had, that the most extraordinary changes often begin with the simplest acts of human kindness. She thought about her grandmother, about Kent lying on that sidewalk, about all the women who had passed through Haven House and gone on to build new lives. She thought about the ripple effects of that one moment when she'd chosen to stop and help rather than walk away. Tomorrow, she would return to her work, to the women who needed someone to believe in them, to the program that was changing lives one person at a time. But tonight she simply felt grateful for the journey that had brought her here, for the people who had believed in her potential when she couldn't see it herself, and for the knowledge that kindness, once given freely, has the power to transform not just individual lives, but the entire world. As the plane descended toward Hartford, Emily smiled, fingering the heart pendant at her throat. Her grandmother had been right. Kindness truly was the only thing that multiplied when you divided it, and the beautiful thing about that truth was that there was no limit to how much it could grow. Thank you so much for joining me on this incredible journey of Emily and the Damon family. This story reminds us that no act of kindness, no matter how small, is ever wasted. Sometimes the most beautiful transformations in life begin with the simplest choice to care for another human being. If this story touched your heart, please share it with someone who might need to hear it today. Remember, each of us has the power to be someone's unexpected blessing, just like Emily was for Kent, and Kent and Matt were for her. Until our next story together, keep spreading kindness wherever you go. You never know whose life you might change, or how that change might come back to transform your own life in ways you never imagined. With love and gratitude for all the beautiful souls who choose compassion over indifference every single day,